Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So, is your marketing made human? Is there a human element to your branding? This is such an important issue that so many marketers and brands and advertisers fail to make every day. And so many brands rely on bad automation and personalization techniques simply to connect, but they don't really connect to the core of who their customer, a real life human, is. Touseef Mirza is a brand content strategist and adjunct professor of marketing, the Core Connect Conference co founder, and she's a subject matter expert on the human side of brand marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss taking a more humanized approach to marketing, brand messaging, conferences, what we're teaching students, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a human made marketer with a marketing shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Touseef, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and your career today.
Okay, yes, sure. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
So I actually have a science background. I have a science background in chemistry and toxicology and in occupational environmental health. And I actually worked 4 years in public health. And what I realized when I was in public health, I was working a lot with the public, and I had to learn how to communicate science and not just, work on a computer and write science reports and stuff like that. And it really became clear to me that the communication of science is more important than the science itself. And I'm happy that there's other scientists that work on science, but for me, communication was really important. And so I was trying to find other industries after that could actually merge those two things together of science and communications. And I found out about all these pharmaceutical marketing agencies. Mm-hmm. And I worked in that area for a good amount of time, for about maybe 10 years, and just wore a lot of hats, anything that was thrown at me. So from account management to editor to medical writer to copywriter, and I ended up in digital strategy. And from there, I actually became a consultant in content strategy because, again, my gaga is communication, and how do you actually communicate the most effective way now, more on a digital platform. And I was at that point that I really got interested in branding because I realized everything stems from there, even before content. And then I had this amazing opportunity. I became the CMO of the Advertising Research Foundation. And through that time, I also started a conference called the Core Connect Conference, which is all about how to make marketing more human. And since then, I've also started to teach at NYU in personal branding at the School of Engineering.
I met you through connection on LinkedIn and was following some of the great stuff you were doing, including with Mark Schaefer and having him come to speak, who's just an amazing influencer. So I met you through the relationship and with the conference. What inspired you to start a conference? And granted, we had the distinct pleasure of attending one where I get to meet you face to face. I thought it was incredibly great and intimate to do the marketing meetups, but you've done some bigger scale things with the Core Connect conference. What sort of inspired you to do that?
Yes, so the Core Connect conference, that's really all about how to make marketing more human. And it actually started, this whole idea came about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when we were at Adweek. And this was with me and my now business partner, Brooke Vines. And that year at Adweek, they were talking a lot about programmatic. They were talking a lot about all different types of digital metrics. And it was just very confusing in general. And what I realized is that people were talking a lot of lingo terms and acronyms and trying to make sense of it. And the pendulum was really to the far right in terms of digital and technology. And we were missing sort of like the core of what advertising and marketing is, which is about creativity and really connecting with people and persuading people and storytelling. So
Such a novel approach to actually talk to a human or a customer.
Exactly, exactly. So really getting down to basics. I think we forgot the basics of it all. And I was wondering, me and Brooke, we were wondering, are we the only ones that are sort of overwhelmed and confused and try to make sense of all of this new era we're entering. And it turns out that it wasn't. We talked to different people and we realized that this was something that people were feeling stressed about as well. And the more we talked about people, the more we realized that people wanted to have this type of conversation. And that's how the Core Connect conference came to be. It was really from an intuitive standpoint of really looking at what was happening and what people wanted to talk about. And beyond just our tagline is marketing made human, but beyond just the marketing aspect, we realized that we wanted to open up that notion and be more holistic about it. So, what we mean by that is Core Connect is really about three pillars. And the first pillar is about leadership. And it's each leader to be able to really connect with their own humanness so that they can actually make the right decisions, and basically coming from a perspective of authentic leadership. Then the second pillar is from a team perspective. And as you know, especially in advertising and marketing, you have to be creative and innovative,
Sure.
or else you won't have a differentiating, value to add to the market. So, in order to do that, you have to go back again and understand what, from a human standpoint, is actually going to help those creative ideas come through. And that's by creating a safe and nurturing environment so those ideas can come through. And finally, the third part is once you have the right direction from a leadership standpoint and have the great ideas that are creative, now it's a question of how are you actually going to put that out there to the market.
Hmm.
And you're going to do it again by first understanding what does your audience really need from a human perspective. And that's really understanding what they value. It's about communicating through storytelling, and at the very end of it all, that's when you use technology to amplify all those efforts. So it's really about, it's not like we're anti-technology. It's actually the opposite. We're really pro-technology, but we want to make sure that technology is implemented in the right place because technology is not going to solve all your problems.
Sure. And you did the first one in Little Rock with your partner where
Yes,
she's based?
exactly. So Brooke is from Little Rock, and we did that 2 years ago in 2017. And then last year we did it in New York because it's my turf. So it was great. Yeah.
So are you going to do another one soon?
Yeah. So actually, this year we did one at the beginning of the year, but it was less of a conference format. It was more of a Core Connect talk. And we're going to be doing one other one of those formats towards the end of the year.
So you are correct. I speak at a lot of those same evil conferences you're just talking about, where we talk about all the crazy new tools, but there aren't nearly as many conferences as there used to be, really, that really focus on the humanity and that part of the brand. And I wish there were, because there's so many that have a bright, shiny new object that they say will connect to them, but it doesn't do it. It just, it's something wrapped around automation. But it's just, especially when you think of personalization, you got every tool in the world that tells you that you're going to personalize content for somebody, but it doesn't actually have a personal conversation with somebody. And that's something that I think is still a miss with a lot of the technology, even as we try to make strides. So, well, then talk about your own marketing meetups, which I got to attend last night. And one of the things I really, really love about something like that, and I've been to some in other cities, but here in New York, you've got plenty of people that are here in this space. I mean, it's marketing and advertising central. But I love, again, how intimate it was. About 100 people pulled together. Again, Mark Schaefer spoke. So you've had some killer keynotes that we were talking about earlier. But just that exchange of ideas, I thought that was really great. And I'm just kind of curious what inspired you to do that as well, because I always encourage people to do those in other cities and just have those discussions to start talking through a lot of the things that we need to fix.
Yeah. So another thing that's really, really great about a small gathering is because I feel that people just feel more comfortable. And when they feel more comfortable, they feel less stressed and they're able to actually ask the questions and be around people in a much more comfortable way for exchange. And what's interesting with that aspect is that was also one of the reasons why we created Core Connect, because I find that when we go to a lot of conferences, especially in this digital age, a lot of times I think the people feel that the solutions are really outside of their realm, like they're somewhere out there over there. But to go to a conference like Core Connect or to be in an intimate setting, it's really coming back to the focus of you and really understanding that you actually have a lot of inherent wisdom yourself. If it's marketing made human, if it's authentic leadership, if it's about teams, that is about nurturing and being open. And so once people, and I don't know if people recognize that necessarily from a conscious level, it might be unconscious, but I think when people feel that, they naturally become less stressed. And I
Mhm.
believe that if they become less stressed, then that's where you really have access to greater ideas. So, me and Brooke have always said if we're even able to just reduce stress in the events that we do, then that's a great thing. And we're happy with that.
So, one of the really, really interesting things I wish you'd elaborate on a little bit is your work with the Lion Share Fund.
Yes.
And I'm a big fan. We talked about this before, but I wish you'd kind of help us understand what you're doing as part of your consulting.
Absolutely. So I love this initiative. It's called the Lion Share Fund. It's part of, it's supported by the UN Development Program, UNDP. It started about a year ago. And the mission of the Lion Share Fund is for the conservation of wildlife and animal welfare. The way they do it is really ingenious and innovative. The way they do it is that brands basically will partner with Lion Share. And when they do, when these brands basically use an animal in their ads, a small contribution of their media spend actually goes to Lion Share, and then Lion Share will use that for the conservation and preservation of wildlife. So it's sort of like an indirect way of paying the animals. And what's really interesting is that about 20% of the ads right now use animals. Of the 20% of the top brands actually use animals in their ads, and this stat was really surprising to me that 9 out of the 10 animals that are used most often are actually on the endangered list or threatened list. So it is also literally to the benefit of brands to save these animals because these are the animals that are making them the most money.
Well, and you know which ones I care about the most.
The shark.
Uh huh. Absolutely.
Why do I know that?
Yeah. So how did you? I mean, what? How did you come across this gig? I mean, this is not. This is like. I mean, something that everybody would love to jump over, but this is a unique opportunity.
So this is again the beauty of going to events and conferences, right? So I went to the Social Good Summit that was happening last year in September in Manhattan, and the head of the UNDP, he was talking about the Lion Share, and I've been really thinking about since the past year and a half of how to use the power of marketing and branding for good and positive change. Like that's been on the back of my mind. I think culture is ready for that. I think this is where we're all heading. But how do you, I know brands are really trying to focus on purpose. But there's a disconnect there sometimes that I feel that probably that the consumer gets is that sure a brand wants to be of purpose, but at the same time at the end of the day they want to make money. So there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but you as a consumer you wonder like, do I trust them for that or do I trust them for the other, and or maybe there's both. And so I was always trying to like figure out how do you bring these two elements together. And then when I went to the summit and I saw the Lion Share Fund, I was blown away because I said, oh my God, they cracked the code. Because if brands can now work with an entity of service that the consumers can trust, now you can trust the brand in really advocating for the value system that they have. And that is a game changer. And when I realized that, I was just like, oh my God, what do I do with myself with this information?
Sure.
And I just reached out to the head. His name is Ashim Steiner. And I just reached out to him via email. I found his email and I said, I love what you're doing. I have some thoughts. Can I do something? And that's how it began.
Yeah, that's great. And they're trying to reach sustainable development goals by 2030, which, I mean, this would probably break the bank at Animal Planet. But every other brand should get involved because there's something for everybody.
Yes.
There's an animal out there that fits it. And it's a wonderful cause.
I mean, we're really we've only been around for a year. We're really excited that we won at Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. We won the Grand Prix of sustainable goals. So that's a big way to gain awareness as well. So I think more and more that we are spreading the word, more and more we'll be able to push this initiative further. I mean, I really do think that this is the wave of the future. And it's just a question of time for everybody to get on this bandwagon because the customer and what they want and their state of mind and the fact that they know now that they are a broadcaster and they can voice their opinion, they understand that they matter, and that's what they want to see reflected in the brands that they buy from.
You didn't use any lions as paid influencers. You didn't have to pay the lions anything, did you?
Not at all. No, they do their own thing. They have enough power by themselves.
Their own Instagram channels.
Yes.
So talking about personal branding though, and this is another thing that really, made me jump to want to talk to you because I thought it was really interesting that you were teaching a personal branding at NYU and within the School of Engineering.
Yes.
So how did that all evolve? Because it's a great course, but you don't typically think of it through engineering and.
Right. So actually, at the School of Engineering, there's a department that's called IDM, Integrated Digital Media. It's a really cool program where you have a combination mostly of computer science and coding, design, and creativity. So they basically built the program to mimic the needs of the market. And since they do have a creative aspect of it, that program really wanted to help their students to understand how to communicate that creativity and also help them once they're actually out in the world, how do they actually embellish all of the knowledge and skill set they have. The course itself is called Professional Practices for Creatives, and I position it as a personal branding course because basically that's what it is. Everything that I've learned from a product and service marketing and branding standpoint, I'm basically translating that to human potential. That's how I built the course. And I think when people think about personal branding, right away their mind goes to social media.
Yeah.
And that's not how I define personal branding. I think that it is.
You mean you're teaching them something other than Instagram hacks to grow to 100,000
yes,
followers?
I'm sure maybe when they come to the class, they get very excited.
Yeah.
But it's really towards like the fourth to the last class that we start talking about social media. Because for me, the way that I look at personal branding and human potential and really making it is first, each individual has to really understand who they are, what are their passions, what are their skill sets, what did they like when they were younger, so they understand which is the road that they want to move towards in terms of understanding their value system. Once you understand that direction, then it's a question of how are you able to communicate that in a way that's effective. But not only communicating it, but communicating it in a way to influence the person you're trying to influence. So really, at this point for the students, it would be, for example, the interviewer, the employer. So not just stating who you are, but in a way that is going to show the value that you're going to bring to the employer. And so I always position it that way. I always say that branding is 3 C's. C1, well, for a product or service, C1 is the company. So it's who you are, description of your products and services. C2 is the customer. What value do you bring and why should they care? It has nothing to do with you. It's about them. And C3 is the competition. How are you going to actually differentiate yourself in the market? And when it comes to personal branding, it's again the 3 C's, but thankfully I found another word instead of company for the first C, it's character. So C1 is character, C2 is customer, C3 is competition. So first you have to understand your character, then it's a question of communicating your character as it pertains to your customer. And then you create all the collateral materials that is going to be in alignment with that brand. So that's when your resume comes in, your portfolio comes in, and yes, social media comes in. But that is just a part. I think a lot of people are more interested, this is not just for the students, but in general, when they think about personal branding, they're more interested in putting stuff out there instead of actually taking the time of really understanding who am I, what's the message that I want to communicate, and then share that consistently. You can change, obviously, what you're talking about, but it needs to feel that it's always coming from the same person.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the conversation I had with Mark Schaefer on that podcast when, he wrote the book Known, and we talked about like, know, and trust. And to me, trust has always been in all caps, should be all caps, and the one they should focus on the most. But I love the three C's. What's some of the reaction that you've gotten from the students? And this was new for the College of Engineering, correct?
Yes. So basically, when I started teaching last year, it was the first time was being taught, because this program is, I think, about 3 years, and this class is only given to undergrad students in their last semester. So this is when the first students from that league were graduating. So I started it off, and I will be honest, I was just like, okay, how am I going to prepare all these students? And I really want to bring, that's just my MO, like how am I going to bring the human aspect of things and the communication side of things. The book that is actually mandatory reading for my class is actually Dale Carnegie of How to Win Friends and Influence People.
One of the greatest books in the world.
Because I just feel, even if, we're at IDM and it's all like, technology and latest and greatest, it's so important. I think that people say, okay, you have to come up with great ideas. It's one thing to come up with a great idea, but then if you're not able to communicate that idea in a way that's going to influence the person you're trying to influence, it doesn't matter what your idea is. It's not going to go through. So that is so important, and understanding just human interrelations, because you're going to be working with people all the time. Even if you're a freelancer, you're going to be working for people, and so that doesn't change. And you're always trying to either sell a product or influence somebody. So you're always with people all the time. And that's something that I learned in my own experience of there's one thing which is learning a skill set, but to actually use those skill sets by understanding human interpersonal skills is so much more powerful.
What feedback have you gotten from the students? Because I'd love to also know, not just when they're in the class, because they probably want to give you positive feedback for better grades, but really the ones that come back to you later, after they've left the school.
I mean, they have said at the beginning that they don't know necessarily where we're going with all of this at the beginning, because they're a little bit disoriented. But once we start the course, and for me, it's extremely important because it is a human communication course. I want them to communicate. So they have to communicate in the class. So critical thinking, and an open space for discourse that is really safe, so that people can really exchange those ideas. And I could see over the course of the semester that they just feel a little bit more comfortable. They're able, and also all of them practice their story day in day. Storytelling is so important as well, because that's another way to connect on a human level. So that's something that we work through, and some of them actually have told me that it has helped them remember why they made the decisions that they did, because I helped them really go back. Storytelling is not just about what you want to do now, but where you came from and why did you make these decisions. And I think that some of the students are just so inundated and stressed out that they forget why they even got there. So that brings everything back into perspective. So that's one area. And just to enable people, the way that I help the classroom feel safe is I apply a PIP which is you give first positive impact, then you can say that somebody can improve upon, and then you finish off with another positive thing to say, or you can round it up in a positive way. And that has actually helped people to feel that they can express themselves, because whenever somebody expresses themselves, or whenever we're critiquing work in the classroom, if somebody is saying, well, I don't like that, I say, where's the first P? We always have to bring it back to the first P. And what I realize, and what they realize, is most of the time we do like something, but we're more preoccupied in saying the negatives. But that really impacts the environment of exchange of a community. And once they understood that, they actually became much more encouraging of each other and much more relaxed with each other, because they knew that every time we're first starting off for the yes, and then we can improve, and then we're going to end it with a yes.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So if you had to wave your magic wand and you were to recreate a lot of the marketing that is done at whether it be NYU or any other school, what would you sort of change now that you work in marketing and also teach in marketing? What would you want to change? Because all of us are trying to fix a lot of the mess that marketing and advertising has created. But if it were for you, what would some of the things we could do in higher ed to change marketing and advertising going forward?
So I think two things come to mind. The first thing is, even if you have, because I know that online courses can be a big thing. If you do have an online course, that you still have to have live exchange, so that you can have ideas that can actually either grow together or tackle together, but you need to have physical interaction, and because that's what you said also, you have to build trust, and once you build trust, then you can start growing that exchange. But if you don't have that, you're going to be square at zero. And in order to be successful in the business world, you have to learn this skill. This is not just a soft skill. It's an extremely powerful skill. And all the great leaders will say that as well, that most of them got
Absolutely.
to the top because they knew how to talk to people, how to connect with people.
Well, one thing to add to that, I know a lot of the top speakers have all said that they get more out of going to conferences and networking and speaking to people, not on stage, but just out on the floor or anywhere else. But they get that connection with people that they get live, as opposed to being an author or something else in marketing, is worth so much more to them. Just making that connection, like you're talking about, just that basic human connection and exchange of ideas, and that you can establish trust so quickly with as well, for both sides.
For both sides, absolutely. And I think people, and this is actually in the Dale Carnegie book, which is, everybody yearns to feel that they are seen, that they are present. And that's just how we've been for thousands of years. This is not because I'm egotistical. This is just how we are built. And so it's only once you have that acknowledgement that you forge that connection, and then you can grow upon that. So I think that's one thing. And the second thing I will say, which I commend actually IDM where I'm at, is to have a course like this to help students understand the importance of communication and of sharing their ideas. Because especially now that we're going to have, one other thing that I just do for the students, because I'm realizing, because of my experience and where we're going, that technology is just going to get faster and faster. And part of the education should be also, how do you deal with this fast change? Human beings don't like to change. We know this, right? And if we do change, we do it incrementally. But technology is going way faster than we can change right now. And to give them tools on how to deal with that. So some of the things I teach to my students is, how are you able to keep your emotional stability throughout the stress? Because you are going to have, beyond having just a bad day at work, the the technology and the industry might take a huge left turn, and then you're going to be left in the dark. And how are you going to deal with it? And so you're going to have to be able to rely on your own sanity to be able to make certain decisions. And that's something actually that an author that I love from Sapiens, we both love, Yuval Noah Harari talks about this. And I mean, I had that a little bit in the back of my mind, but when he said it, I said, oh my God, I'm just taking this and running with it now.
Yeah.
If he says it, it's gold.
Yeah. I love that when you brought it up last night, by the way. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the questions last night at the New York branding meetup with Patrick Hanlon was, I think it was a question on trends and what do you think the next trends are coming? And my reply was, it's fine to look at trends, but trends means that it's going to continually be changing because that's what a trend means. And a lot of times we have a focusing on what's changing, but we can also look at the fact that there's certain things that never change. And those are the things that we're talking about now, that people don't change in terms of their elemental essence of what human nature is, which is, for example, everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to feel that they matter. Everybody wants to feel safe. So if we're able to, and everybody is still completely hardwired with storytelling. So if we look at those things that don't change and implement a little bit of the trends instead of focusing all of our time on the trends, that's more effective, I believe.
Well, what are the things you're seeing, from a marketing perspective that are pretty consistent? Most, we live in a world where a lot of times we strategize and think we can fix everything with marketing, but obviously we can't. So, how does a brand need to look at positioning themselves so that consumers see them better for what they actually are, what their values are, and everything else?
So I think one of the things, just by working at different places and also being a consultant, one of the things that I see is that a lot of times people are saying, oh, our marketing isn't working, or it's not reaching the ROI we want. Okay, now we need to change the tactic. And they're so tactical focused. But a lot of the times I always ask, well, is it really about the marketing? Or is it actually about one step before that, which is, are you actually creating the content that is actually going to resonate? And even more, take another step back and say, well, is our brand actually aligning itself with the value system of the consumers? And are we actually being consistent every single time? Because in this day and age of information overload, if you're going to talk about your brand or service one way one day and another way, it's just going to confuse the consumer and you're going to lose them. So number one, it's important to understand your identity, and if your identity and value system resonates, and then to consistently put that out. And that's number one. That gives you the direction. And then you can talk about, okay, now we're going to create the content. So one of the other things I realize a lot of times is you'll have, I work mostly on the agency side, you'll have a beautiful branding exercise that somebody will do. And then, so, that takes a certain amount of time, and then they finish it. And then when it's time for content and marketing, everybody gets in a room and they say, okay, so what are we going to do about content and marketing?
Yeah.
And after I understood branding, because that came like about five years ago, and then very intuitively, now I'm just like, well, everything is in your document. So what I realize is that people do branding and then they just put it on a shelf and then they do something else. The key question is how are you actually going to be able to operationalize that brand into content and engagement so that your brand can actually be felt? Your brand needs to be manifested in concrete ways. And a brand is really about a feeling. How is it exuding? And so every time when I'm working on a project, and I'm a stickler for that, for my own brands of Core Connect and your branding meetup, is I always ask the question, is this on brand? And what that means is, am I feeling the same thing when I'm reading this social media post as I want my brand to be? And when I'm doing the conference, am I creating a space that feels inspiring and concrete? Because that's what Core Connect is about. And that needs to be, that question needs to be asked every single time, because the brand is the essence of everything, and after that you create the content for that, and when you have the content for that, then you market it. It's not the end all be all of the marketing. You always have to make sure that everything is in alignment with those three pillars.
And another group you reference that is part of this same exact discussion is your employees. I can't tell you how many times that you get these wonderful glossy brochures that your HR department put together with some help from marketing or from an agency. And they've got all the normal forms you fill out, but you really don't get indoctrinated into a brand. And then you become distant. And all the stuff that we've done that's marketing to a consumer, it can fall so flat internally when they don't share the same passion for your brand, obviously, that you as a consumer or your leaders do.
Absolutely.
And it hurts businesses so much.
Yeah,
So
and I think also with the new generation coming in,
Yeah.
for them it's going to be even more important, not just from a consumer standpoint, but from an employee standpoint to work
Absolutely.
for a company. So now you're talking about talent retention.
Yeah.
You know, like this is big, and
Yeah.
and I think it forces the leaders of the companies to, again, not just talk the talk, but how are we actually going to embody this? And I think at the end of the day, everybody's going to win. You know, like once you have the leader that's on the right track, that's going to be felt by the employees. The employees are going to be able to be more effective, be happier, be more creative, because that's all, you know, influences each other. And then that's also going to be reflected out with the consumers, because consumers are going to feel it too, because they're going to see it in the work.
Yeah, employees are some of your best influencers to your consumers.
Yeah, that's why we needed to put that in Core Connect. That's the second pillar. It is the team. Like this is going into so many different conferences. Everything just felt so fragmented that we tried to find a way to bring everything together in a holistic way. So at least you can see how all these different variables interconnect in a very broad way, and then you can start digging in. But if you're just going, you know, off to the left with this little minutia thing, but your huge problem is actually with the team, then it doesn't matter what tactic you're doing, because it's not going to be produced in the best way possible.
Touseef, you're on a shark's perspective.
Yes.
You work to help save wild animals. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Well, right now it would have to be the whale shark,
Okay.
because that's the one that we're protecting the most, that has the most attention at the coral triangle. So I will go with that one. And
Perfect.
also it's the biggest one.
Thank you.
And it's
Biggest fish in the sea.
Yeah, and it looks really sweet. It doesn't look angry like the other ones.
Well, it did get on Finding Dory and, you know,
There you go.
Finding Nemo. So then are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Yes, please. I
All right.
can't wait.
Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Do you want it in a paperback book, or do you want it in a Kindle?
A paperback,
Thank
hands
you.
down.
Thank
Full
you.
of notes, ridiculousness.
Now, question number 2, Montreal or New York?
Oh, God. You're going to get me killed for this one.
I know. Well, your family back home, so.
My family back home.
But they
I'm
are
from-
Canadians, so we kind of discount them once you're over here.
Do not say that. I would say I'm from Montreal, and my heart is in New York.
Okay, that's fine. Number 3, Core Connect Conference or the New York Branding Meetup? You run both of them. Let's see where your heart is.
I will have to say Core Connect, because that's where it all started, and that's
Fair.
where all of the other stuff came through. So I have to pay dues to Core Connect.
All right, number 4, getting ready to speak at your own conferences or getting to speak in front of students every day, which is tougher?
That's a good question.
Yeah, PowerPoints are a little bit different perspective, you know, for a conference versus a classroom.
I guess the first thought, I think both. I whenever I speak, I really make it a big deal, because I really want to help people a lot and be of service. But the first thing that came to my head was students, because I really want to help them along and on the right path right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good enough. Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread.
Okay, good. So Touseef, where can people find out more about you, follow what your thought leadership and what you're doing, and find out more about the conferences and a lot more?
Yes, absolutely. So Core Connect, you can find us online at thecoreconnectconference.com. I also have my own website, which is my name, touseefmirza.com. If you're in New York City, please check out the New York Branding Meetup. You can look us up on meetup.com, and I believe right now I'm the only one that's running a branding meetup in New York, which is surprising.
Surprising.
Yes, I think there was another one before, but now I'm the only one. And then if you're interested in different articles, because I also write an article, you can check me out at LinkedIn, and I post stuff there.
Perfect. Touseef, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there was my conversation with Touseef Mirza, a brand content strategist and adjunct professor of marketing, the Core Connect conference co-founder, and she's a subject matter expert on the human side of brand marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, if you feel like conferences you attend are not addressing your needs, then follow the footsteps of today's guest and start your own marketing meetup somewhere. Grab a group of friends that you can gather with, as well as others in the public that share your interest, and then organize a small event. Most events didn't start out with thousands of people attending, and some of the best ones by far are the ones that are most intimate, where you can have a real exchange of ideas and really get the chance to network with people who share your interest. It may not replicate for everyone, but even Touseef, who has a smaller group meeting that meets fairly regularly, she connected with Mark Schaefer, one of marketing's top speakers and influencers. They learn of each other's similar interests, and the next thing you know, he's speaking at her event. So who knows? It can start off small, but grow into something where you've got one of marketing's top influencers speaking at your event. Second, how are you bringing humanity to your marketing? Marketers and advertisers generally do a horrible job by forgetting who it is that we're actually marketing to for all of this. It's not a personalized message written through machine learning that customizes the journey. It's whether or not your message really connects with a human. Now, she goes on to say, and I quote, "It's one thing to come up with a great idea, but then if you're not able to communicate that idea in a way that's going to influence the person you're trying to influence, it doesn't matter what your idea is. It's not going to go through." So that is so important in understanding to human interrelations. You're going to work for people all the time. Great point, and so very true. And she brings up one of my favorite books of all time that has resonated with people since he wrote the book and published it in 1936. I enjoy reading a lot of books about marketing and advertising, but one of the most important reads, not only as it pertains to this discussion, but rather any and for any profession, is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's an absolute must read. Third, marketing quite simply won't fix everything. I talk about this often, how the confused buyer always says no. And it's always reflected when a brand says one thing and then acts another. Think about all the glossy messaging you see and then the bad service that brand doesn't live up to in their promise. It happens over and over again. We try to come up with marketing fixes, but branding is not just a logo sitting on top of a product or service. Your brand is who you are throughout, from your leader's vision to your marketing messaging, to how you operationalize your business, to how it's reflected in your employees, to the actual product or service and what that actually is. It goes so far beyond a logo and a tagline. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for honoring me with your time. And in the immortal words of the Human League, nothing could change the way I feel. No one else could ever take your place. I'm only shark of flesh and blood I'm made. I think that's what their lyrics said anyway. So please join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.